Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is pre-recorded Monday. I'm just back from vacation, and yes, my face is darker. I'm sorry about that. But George and I recorded this episode before I left. I didn't get time to put it up, and it's important for you to know about. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. Today is September 22nd, 2014.
All right, it's Monday afternoon. If you're watching us late, it's Monday evening, and you have a decision to make. George and I have a meaty topic we're going to discuss on a Monday, and if you're still worn out from a good worship service and you want to be prepared for Monday Night Football, save us till Wednesday. Just right now, push pause, and you can watch us on Wednesday when you're more prepared for a meaty topic. George and I have decided to talk about the fight for the soul of the Anglican Communion. Who are you guys to talk about that? We're nobodies. Okay, right up front, we agree we're nobodies. I am the lowest of lows to talk about the fight of the soul of the Anglican Communion. However, I'm an observer. I've seen what's happened over the last 20 years. George is a professional journalist, and he's been to many of these things in the church and watched them. And I think it's a great time to talk about this because, well, there's nothing else to talk about on Monday. George, we're talking about this because we got a press release from Limerick, Ireland, telling us that the Canon Kenneth Kiernan, who's currently the General Secretary of the ACC, which is the Anglican Communion Council, is one of the instruments of unity. You see, we got a lot to talk about here, has been elected to be a bishop in Ireland. Who is he? What's this ACC stuff? Well, we're going to give you a little bit of inside baseball here and talk about the current structure of the Anglican Communion, what's happening now, and what needs to happen in the future. First, George, help me out here explaining the instruments of unity, which we have Lambeth, the Primates Council, the ACC, and there's one other I'm missing. Oh, yeah, Archbishop of Canterbury. So let's start. Let's give people a background of the instruments of unity.
We have no pope.
No.
It's easy when you have a pope or when you have a patriarch, then you know who the top dog is. Anglicanism does not have a top dog. It does not have a pope. And over the past 400 years, it's been trying to figure out where authority lies. The first Lambeth, then, as you mentioned, Kevin, we have four things. The Archbishop of Canterbury, his office, the Lambeth Conference, which is a meeting of every 10 years of the bishops of the Anglican Communion, the Anglican Consultative Council, which is a group of people, representatives from each of the churches that come together every 3 years to consult, and the primates, who are the archbishops or moderators or presiding bishops, the heads of the 38 provinces that make up the Anglican Communion. Where does authority lie? In other words, who gets to say who is an Anglican, what is an Anglican, what we believe, what we don't believe? When I say we have no pope, it's true, because whereas in Catholicism, at the end of the day, the pope, as the magisterium of the church, he determines doctrine at the end of the day, we have no such entity. For most of the history of Anglicanism, the pope has been the king, the queen, parliament, or convocation.
Right.
It wasn't the first pan-Anglican. After the American Revolution and the Episcopal Church was founded, there was a long period of time when American Episcopalians were not considered Anglicans by the Church of England. Why was that? Well, because they did not give loyalty to the king or the queen.
Yeah.
The first pan-Anglican gathering was in 1868, and the Americans flocked to that because all of a sudden they were now being recognized as bishops as equally valid as Church of England bishops or Church of Ireland bishops. And it essentially was a gathering of bishops of the British Empire plus the Americans. And every 10 years, with a few exceptions caused by world wars, the bishops have come together to talk about issues of major importance: women's ordination, human sexuality, baptism, mission, major meaty topics. Well, that was the primary gathering. Well, in the 60s and 70s, we started having these pan-Anglican congresses where groups would, lay people and clergy would attend with bishops. Well, they never really took off because they got so expensive. And in the late 60s, we formed this thing called the Anglican Consultative Council, where churches would send a representative or two or three, depending upon how big they are, to a meeting every 3 years to consult, not make decisions, but to consult on issues that were of importance. And then in the late 70s, we had the formation of the primates meeting. It used to be just the big five, the Americans, the Australians, the English, the Canadians, and a few others. But in the 70s, they started adding and inviting everybody. And so during the time of George Carey, everything sort of came together and gelled. We had the primates meetings, which would be held every 3 years, where the Archbishop of Canterbury would be the president of the gathering, and they would discuss issues of importance to the church. The primates meetings and the ACC and all these things work together. Now, but beginning in 2003, this sort of schedule that was unofficially recognized by a paper called the Virginia Report, the authority that people had given to these groups collapsed beginning in 2003. And today, none of these groups have any real input or authority.
And it's amazing to have watched this happen. You and I were in Dar es Salaam for the primates meeting. That primates meeting was largely a reaction to what happened here in America with the consecration of Gene Robinson. All the primates came together. They put together a statement. The statement was going to hold the Episcopal Church accountable. It was very stern, had some good teaching. Everybody who was at the meeting signed the statement, including Catherine Jefferts Schori, although now she denies it. And they told Rowan Williams, go forward and enforce this. They flew into Louisiana for the House of Bishops meeting here in America, and everything that was good about the primates meeting completely collapsed here in America, and Rowan Williams was talked out of enforcing the communique that came from Dar es Salaam. So right away we found out that these instruments can't work within each other and can't hold each other accountable, and there's no checks and balances.
The subsequent primates meetings, we went to the one in Alexandria, Egypt, were basically reactions, well, why, Rowan, didn't you do what you were supposed to be doing? And by the time it came down to the last primates meeting in Dublin, Ireland, which you and I skipped because half the primates were also skipping, it was basically a talking show. Sure. The primates would not, the primates meeting as an instrument of authority had broken down because more than half of the primates contested its authority and its ability to speak for them. Well, and we saw the same thing with the Lambeth Conference. Yeah. In 1998, the Lambeth Conference issued a resolution 1.14 on human sexuality, which says this is what we believe about human sexuality and homosexuality. Well, the Americans complained and the liberals complained, and Rowan Williams, when the next Lambeth Conference came around, refused to allow any resolutions, refused to allow any decisions to be made, refused to allow anything to happen, such that this was a 2-week graduate seminar where the Wives Conference talked about issues just as important, just as vital. Now, I don't mean to be unkind, but when the Wives Conference is as important as the main conference, then the main conference is a waste of time.
Well, and what happened, a death knell of any of the instruments of unity is to make a godly statement. The death knell of the primates was Dar es Salaam, when they said we have to hold the Episcopal Church accountable. That was it. The primates are done. Lambeth put together Lambeth 110. There's never been another Lambeth conference of any consequence.
Big difference.
Yeah, if you go, on the Archbishop of Canterbury, never made a decision, so forget that. And then there's the ACC. They've not had their death knell either because they've not made a statement. But anytime there's a decision,
Kevin, you and I were present. I'll interrupt you here. You
Sure.
and I were present for the death knell of the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
That was in Jamaica.
It was, yeah.
It was also the death knell of the Archbishop of Canterbury too. We had this Anglican Covenant,
Yeah.
which Rowan Williams was going to push forward, and we would all sign on to it, and it would all be the answer to our prayers. At the very start of that meeting, the Church of Uganda was told one of its delegates was not an acceptable delegate. Canon Phil Ashey, who at that time was a priest of the Church of Uganda, a former Episcopal priest, was a clergy representative for the Church of Uganda. Catherine Jefferts Schori complained, saying, why is this former Episcopalian who has never been to Uganda, as far as she knew, and certainly wasn't ministering in Uganda, but in Newport Beach, California, why is this man allowed to represent Uganda? And Kenneth Kieran said, oh, well, he shouldn't be. We're not going to allow him to come. I questioned Kenneth Kieran in a press conference and saying, Canon Kieran, I remember at an ACC meeting I covered in Scotland in 1998, an American bishop was present who was one of the American delegates, and the rules require that he be a serving bishop in Episcopal office.
He was retired, wasn't he?
Bishop Mark Dyer was teaching then at Virginia Seminary. He was no longer serving an Episcopal office. Nobody disputed this. It was perfectly understood by everybody. According to the rules, he shouldn't be allowed. Well, John L. Peterson, the then chairman of the ACC, said, well, what you say is true, but we allow each individual church to decide who gets to represent them in this forum. And I asked Kenneth Kieran, where have the rules been changed? What statement has been made that no longer means that John L. Peterson's decision is in force? And the response was, that was then, and this is now. Those were his exact words. And from that point forward, the ACC has had no real authority. Their last meeting in New Zealand, we skipped, frankly, because, some of the delegates the Ugandans weren't going to show up again. The other people were sending their delegates basically for an extended tourist trip. Nothing of consequence, nothing of significance happened. And also remember at that ACC meeting, Kevin, Rowan Williams put all of his authority, all of the power of his office in passing the Anglican Covenant. Mm-hmm. What happened?
Well, he lost the bet. All his chips on the table were taken by the opposing Episcopal Church. And back then it was draft 4. We remember paragraph 4, that would have held those people accountable who, it was a bipolar covenant back then. Now there's no covenant. We can't agree on what we agree on. All we can agree on is what we disagree on. And that makes for a broken church. We are a broken, torn communion. And I don't know what the future purports for it. I don't think we can last forever in this torn state. Something has to happen. We've seen glimmers of hope. Yeah?
Kevin, I think we know what is going to happen. Mm-hmm. We're seeing it already. It's not that things haven't frozen. We have the Episcopal Communion right now.
Yeah, geez.
You laugh.
I laugh.
We have the Episcopal Communion. Yes, we have the Episcopal Church. Mm-hmm. And those smaller churches like Brazil, for instance, and those who have a theological affinity, say like the Church in Wales, who are following the Episcopal Church in its understandings of theology, doctrine, and discipline. We have the GAVCON Communion. And we have an atomization into really, and then we have a small group of people, smaller groups like the Global South, those people who are sympathetic to GAVCON but are not in GAVCON. Mm-hmm. We have people like Burundi, for instance, who are sympathetic to the Global South but who need the support and recognition of the Church of England because of their difficult internal situations. And then we have churches that are completely dysfunctional, like the Church of South India, who they're with everybody simultaneously. So into this vacuum, we have the forces of money, of power, and of doctrine and theology.
Well, I need to back up here. I think the only force at play currently is money. I believe in the short term, in the next 5 years, the Global South will fold. And either move into GAVCON or choose its side with Canterbury. I believe that the Episcopal Communion, we call it, will either grow or at some point say we need to stop doing what we're doing and really hunker down here at home and become a better communion. That's been an idea that came up last week in this document called Trek. We'll see what happens. I don't think Canterbury or the current instruments of union have the ability to self-correct themselves or recover from the state we're in. They cannot fix a torn communion. So I think GAFCON will grow. The Global South will fold into it, but it's still all controlled by money. GAFCON doesn't have money. The Episcopal Church has the most money. They feed off to the Anglican Communion, and at the end of the day, I fear, sadly, that the money of the Episcopal Church may rule the day. We'll have to see.
Well, at the same time, the Episcopal Church is running out of money.
Well, that's good news, though. Speak.
And the Church of England, Justin Welby, once the bishops of the Church of England allow gay marriage and go along to that, we will see a split of some sort in the Church of England. Mm-hmm. I don't know how it will work. I can envision it, but we will have the successful evangelical parishes, the sort of churches that Billy Graham would want to be affiliated with, go their own way.
Yeah.
And they may affiliate with GAFCON or the Anglican Mission in England, or they may do something completely unknown to us today. But the point is, all of these things are in a mix, and we're moving forward. And the current Archbishop of Canterbury has not been able to he doesn't have the personal stature, the standing to stop this by himself. And Rowan Williams so cheapened the office that the office is unable to stand. And now Kenneth Caron is stepping out of power, so there's no bureaucratic hand at the ACC. We'll see who the next appointee is, and does money talk? Will we get an American? Will we get an African whose loyalties lie with the Episcopal Church? Will we get somebody affiliated with GAFCON?
Well, one of the biggest disasters of the ACC, they had a standing committee, right?
Yes, they still do.
We're here talking about the minutiae of the Anglican Communion. The ACC also has a derelict, evil power center within it called the Standing Committee, which, what a mess. So we don't have...
Kevin, I think we need to realize that amidst all this is a good thing. Mm-hmm. In other words, I know I don't want to sound Pollyannish, but... the structures that George Carey was able to make work only lasted with the man, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. We've been going through a period of revolution within the life of the church. We've been going through a time of destruction and chaos. And who was responsible, Kevin, for the formation of the ACNA? Katharine Jefferts Schori.
Yeah, huh?
Who was responsible for the formation of GAFCON? Mm-hmm. Rowan Williams and Katharine Jefferts Schori. We are seeing institutions arise out of this chaos. And I can't predict what the future will bring, but people are not standing still.
Yeah, they're not standing still. I would not look for anything good in the next 5 years, but I would say down the road, as people react to what's going on in the church, there will finally be a desire to sit down and have a leadership and have a cohesive communion again, where we don't have instruments, but we have something that is a virtual magisterium that holds us together. And, that's something we as a church need to pray for. We as a communion need to desire. Us as Christians need to repent of what we've done in the past to allow God to lead us into this position where we have a church, a full functional communion that serves Him.